Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to No Timeouts, a football show coming at you from the Score Studio. My name is Jonah Birnbaum. That is Dan Wilkins. That is Tyler MacKillop. That is Justin Boone. You know them. You love them. And we love our friends over at Enterprise. Big shout out to Enterprise for sponsoring today's episode. Let's get into it. And today, gentlemen, to kick things off, we're going to do something unprecedented in the history of No Timeouts. We're going to talk about a kicker. Not just any kicker, Justin Tucker. Longtime Baltimore Raven, the most decorated and accomplished kicker, certainly of his generation, maybe of all time. 7 Pro Bowl nods, which is tied for the most ever among kickers, 5 All-Pros. But the dude is struggling right now, struggling big time. He has converted through 13 games this season, 70% of his field goal attempts, which is by far a career worst, second lowest mark in the entire NFL. He's also missed multiple extra points this season for just the second time in his career. It may or may not be a stretch to say that he's costing the Baltimore Ravens games, but what is absolutely fair to say is that he is unreliable right now. Wilkie, what do the Baltimore Ravens do about Justin Tucker?
Man, this one's really hard for me because were it not for a bunch of his kicks, they'd probably be on top of the AFC North right now. And honestly, when you factor in the MVP race that is so often dictated by wins and losses, which it really shouldn't be, he's probably costing Lamar Jackson the MVP right now, which is so dumb to me. He's clearly the MVP of the league. But I think if this were any other situation, you say, dude, it's a kicker. Let's just move on. We'll bring in someone else for the playoff run. But like you said, we're talking about probably the best kicker in NFL history. I think that my take here is that the damage has already been done, at least for the time being. They're probably not going to win the AFC North, but because the AFC is so locked in right now, they're not really at risk of missing the playoffs either. So I think that they do have a little bit of wiggle room to kind of delay the decision a little bit, see if maybe after the bye week he can come back and look at least a little bit more like his former self. I know that a lot of us probably want to say, well, he's just washed, and he might be, but he's only 35 years old, and that's not exactly old by kicker standards. So if by the end of December he hasn't gotten it together, I think they probably have no choice but to bring in someone else. You can't go into the playoffs knowing that your kicker is an issue, having these tight games and having him be the difference, especially when you have a chance to win a Super Bowl. So I think that they do have at least an opportunity here to delay the decision, at least feel comfortable knowing that it wasn't a rash one made before they had to do it. But yeah, if it doesn't change by the end of the season, they got to do something.
I don't know if you guys have ever seen a sports movie before, but this is definitely like a sports movie script. He's going to hit a big kick or two in the playoffs.
Listen, sports movies are bad.
Who do you go to? Like, that's the thing.
That'd be my question.
There's not like a great kicker sitting out there. We've already seen, we just watched the Bengals lost their kicker, and they brought on Cade York, who played earlier in the season for a different team and was missing kicks in that game. Yeah. They have no choice. That's what they had to go to. I just don't, if there was like some great retired kicker that they could lure back, maybe, but I think they just have to hope that Tucker figures it out.
It's funny. I both agree and disagree with both of them in that I don't think that he's going to kick some game. Like, I think he's eventually going to cost them in the playoffs, but at the same time, I'm also thinking, what are you going to do? Like, this is a guy that's been doing what he's been doing for years now, and is there really any other option out there that you're going to be more comfortable with? And there's just, he's not the kicker that, he's a kicker you actually have an allegiance to and has built up all this good rapport with you. Yeah. I don't think Harbaugh is willing to like find some other guy off the street, look him in the eyes and say, hey, can you go make this 50-yarder to win a ball game? So
yeah. I think that's the case for just sticking it out a little bit more because being the guy that he is, he's probably a significant figure in the locker room, which I don't think you can say for most kickers. So it probably would be a controversial decision to move on from him. But if there are more issues down the stretch, then I think you could probably justify it and be like, we got to do something. Like, we have a chance to win a Super Bowl.
How old is Morton Anderson now? Like 187? He might be available.
Is he still alive?
Irrelevant. Here's one thing I'll say, or rather one recent anecdote that I think could give Ravens fans some optimism. Look, in 2022, Harrison Butker, for the season, he dealt with injuries. He only converted at 75%. One of the worst marks in the league. In the playoffs, he went 6 for 7, helped the Chiefs win a Super Bowl. So, you know, given the pedigree, you want to believe that he can get out of this. He can use the next few weeks where there isn't too much at stake to kind of get right, fix whatever's going on, either mechanically or psychologically, and get back to being, if not necessarily Legatron, but something approximating the Justin Tucker that we're all accustomed to. Now, one guy who is absolutely locked in, as improbable as it may seem, is Russell Wilson. He just had his best game of the season in Week 13, throwing for more than 400 yards and 3 touchdowns against that porous Cincinnati Bengals defense, and continuing his astounding resurgence in Pittsburgh. The Steelers are 5-1 with Russ under center, and Wilson currently has his highest QB rating since 2020. T, you saw all of this coming, right?
No, absolutely not. I was like many that thought Russell Wilson was washed and it was over. These numbers are astounding. Like, he's second in the NFL in yards per pass attempt in all situations, second in the NFL in yards per pass attempt under pressure, and also second in the NFL in yards per pass attempt when blitzed. Over 10 yards per attempt when blitzed. 0 turnover-worthy plays as well with the deep ball. Like, he's executing downfield at the highest level in the league. Over almost 54% completion percentage on passes of 20-plus air yards, and 0 turnover-worthy plays. Like, he's making these big plays without putting the ball in harm's way, which is so impressive. And it plays into what Russ has done best in his career, which is the deep ball. But the fit in terms of with Arthur Smith, with the run game, without, Sean Payton has just been much, much better for him. And, I was loving the performance from Justin Herbert against the Bengals, so I've got to give Russ the respect for doing more against this Bengals defense that a lot of quarterbacks have done. It puts me in a situation where I don't feel great about the Steelers as a legitimate contender, but it throws it into question because this is an offense that's running the ball a lot, the second highest rate in the league, like 51% of plays. They're not super efficient doing it. They're 23rd in EPA per rush. He's bailing them out on third down. He's bailing them out a ton with this pass game and the explosive plays. And I don't know, maybe the Steelers are a better team than I think they are. Maybe they're a legitimate Super Bowl contending team. But he's throwing, like, Calvin Austin leads the team in receiving touchdowns. Like, there isn't a lot of talent on this team, and he's still able to do it. It's crazy impressive. My apologies to Russell Wilson, because at this point he's back to elevating his game to being, again, the Steelers being a potential Super Bowl contender. Maybe. I still don't believe it, but maybe.
Russ is definitely playing well. I will just say, and again, we'll go to the schedule. Man, that Bengals matchup is so easy. Yeah. Let's see if Cooper Rush and the Cowboys go out there and have like a huge game against that Bengals defense, because fantasy-wise, you just want to keep attacking that matchup. And I wonder if that has a little bit to do with the most recent performance. For sure, Russ has been playing really well. But I just don't want us to get a little too ahead of our skis here, even though I'm also going to give a ton of credit to Mike Tomlin, who we've talked about before on this panel. I mean, Mike Tomlin doing an incredible job coaching right now. And that decision to go to Russ, I said at the time, it was going to be a win-win either way. Either it confirmed Justin Fields as a starter, or it gave Russ a chance to thrive. And man, Russ has thrived.
Yeah, he's been great, and he's given him a chance. The thing that fascinates me the most is, what do you do at the end of the season? He's a free agent. He takes you on a deep playoff run, you have no choice but to re-sign him. And what do you have to re-sign him for? Do you have to give him like the Kirk Cousins contract?
Oh, man.
Well, you're right, because of the Steelers. It's not like you're a team that this is the spot they're in every year. They don't have the ability.
Also,
to
a team
invest.
that doesn't like to spend money.
It's a good question. I think that you have to bring him back, but maybe there's a number where they wouldn't. I would think there's a number where they wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, there's the franchise tag, but that's a big 1-year salary that's fully guaranteed too. Yeah, I don't know.
Can they use the Fields-Wilson thing against each other to try to get a lower contract there, right? Oh, we'll go with the other guy.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I don't feel that Russ would be super attractive as. I mean, he's having a great year, but I think at this point, he's fit the system really well, and he's proved what he's kind of is. Like, you're not going to ride him to 30, 40 pass attempts a game.
Yeah.
You want to have a good run game. I don't know how many teams that fits.
There might be a way that they can get like the Baker Mayfield contract out of him by, him understanding that this is the best fit for him. This is where he wants to be. And then just, he can also sell that in the media too. Like, he took less so that they could build a better team around him and have a Super Bowl. But yeah, it's a fascinating thing looking ahead to the offseason, because it's a big decision to make. And
one stat that really stands out to me is that in 6 games this season, Russ has more big-time throws than Jared Goff. Is that not absolutely remarkable? Yeah. And look, by expected points added per play, by completion percentage over expected, he's the 6th best quarterback in the league. Like, this is a different Russ Wilson than we saw certainly last year, but that we haven't seen in a while. And, okay, you guys brought him up, Kirk Cousins. He is not Russell Wilson right now. Look, his season with Atlanta has been a roller coaster. It started off shaky, then it seemed like he really hit his stride, and recently he's been struggling big time. His last 3 games, 6 interceptions, no touchdowns. His last time out, he threw 4 picks. He's floundering. The offense is floundering. They've lost all 3 of those games throughout which Kirk has really been struggling. Boone, what should the Falcons do about Captain Kirk?
Well, not to give too much behind the scenes here, but I know I missed a production meeting this week, but we're talking about Tucker and a kicker first before talking about Kirk Cousins potentially losing his job and getting benched. Like, I think that's where this is headed because I am very worried about the matchup this week. And we could look at what Kirk's done the last few weeks, hasn't thrown a touchdown in 3 weeks, the 6 interceptions during that time, coming off just a terrible, terrible game. And they have a quarterback waiting in the wings, and Michael Penix, who they took. And at the time, everybody was questioning it. And some people said, and I thought this too, is this because maybe they weren't happy with what they were seeing from Kirk Cousins coming back from the injury? Maybe they weren't that excited about what he was doing in off-season practices and what they were seeing behind the scenes. I don't know, but right now I am worried because he's got all these bad matchups, and now he's got to go against his former team on the road. They know him well. They are going to be ready for him. This looks like a spot where Kirk could potentially have another meltdown. And if that happens, how do they not go to Penix? And the schedule kind of allows them like an opportunity to potentially do this because they have 2 pretty easy matchups. Week 15, week 16, they get the Raiders and the Giants, right? So you could put Penix in there. Let's see what he can do and then go from there. And if he struggles, then you could go back to Cousins, right? If he plays well, I think you would ride Penix. And the other interesting thing about Penix is if you look at the guys that he played with in college, they haven't really been doing that great in the pros so far, right? Who is it? Jalen Polk and Rome Odunze and Jalen McMillan. They haven't had great rookie seasons. What if Penix was the one actually elevating all those guys? Maybe he's a better quarterback. Do we think this year's quarterback crop has been having a lot of success? He hasn't gotten that opportunity yet. They sat him in the preseason, and you were wondering at the time, like, it's really weird to sit your backup rookie quarterback and not give him preseason snaps. I don't know if they knew something that we didn't at the time, but I really think that they should go to Penix here and give him a chance if Kirk struggles this week, which I expect him to do.
Yeah, it's tough to argue that. I mean, like you said, Kirk started off pretty rough. We were all really concerned after week 1. Mm-hmm. He hit his stride. He looked good for about a month or 2. Yep. And then last week it was like, it just looked like he was washed. I don't know if it's not just a 1 week thing either. Like going back the last 3 weeks, it's been pretty bad and it's been trending in the wrong direction. So
very tough opponents, very tough defenses.
Yeah. I just think that I'm with Boone in that if you thought it was worth it to take Penix at the number 8 spot, which a lot of us didn't agree with, clearly you think enough of him that you should be able to turn to him in this spot where your season is now on the line. Like we've talked about the Bucs before, how they could easily run the table and go win the division. That's pretty much what the Falcons need to do at this point to avoid falling back behind the Bucs, despite having the head-to-head tiebreaker over them. So, I think they're probably in desperation mode, and that's not good looking ahead to the offseason because Kirk is still guaranteed a whole lot of money.
Yeah, 2 things. I think, one, for this week, Kirk handled Tampa's defense pretty well. He could handle the Vikings defense because their schemes are pretty similar. The second thing is, I would assume we all saw the paper airplane jokes on some of those throws against the Chargers last week. I think there is a chance he could be hurt and it not be his Achilles, like potentially arm, shoulder type deal. Maybe he's banged up because the level of play has dropped off significantly, like to a degree that is not typical of, I would think, a healthy Kirk Cousins. So maybe he's hurt. And if he is hurt and can't throw at the level that you expect, then I would definitely want to play Penix because, again, he gives you the better chance to win. And like you said, those couple games later, that's definitely helpful too. But I do think that they're ultimately going to stick with Kirk for, I think, the remainder of the year. But I don't think they want to take the risk of finding out what Penix is while they're in the midst of chasing a postseason spot.
I'll tell you what, though. If he does get benched, we're definitely going to find out that he was hurt. Whether he was hurt or not, there is going to be things get leaked that he is hurt. Yeah.
I mean, he's scrambled twice all season. I mean, that is pretty, I think, a pretty clear indication that he's probably not the healthiest quarterback out there. Like, obviously, he's not.
Been that guy,
he's never been mobile, but like twice all season long, that's pretty remarkable.
There's some weird usage things too. Like he's really struggling, and they're using him with the pistol, which like he hasn't been used that much in his career. Like there's some things that they're doing that's kind of strange with him, but just overall, he doesn't really look like the same quarterback. And there's too much talent on that offense and a good offensive line in front of them. Yeah. Let's see what Penix has again if Kirk struggles this week.
Right. We'll see what happens. Gents, let's turn the page a little bit. We've only got about a month of regular season left. The wild card round is in 5 weeks from now. We're starting to get a clearer sense of who's going to be there come postseason time, who's not going to be there. 2 teams have already clinched playoff spots. There are 3 teams that can secure their postseason berths this weekend. Now, we obviously don't know what seeding is going to look like yet. Of course, there's a lot that could change there, but that's not going to stop us from looking ahead to the first round and making some predictions. So, without further ado, this is Heavy Lies the Crown, presented by Enterprise, and it's a simple exercise, fellas. I want you to tell me, if the season ended today and the playoffs started this weekend, which top-seeded team would be in the most trouble in the wildcard round. So, to be clear, if the playoffs started today, the Chiefs and the Lions would get byes through the wildcard round, which means that the first-round playoff matchups would be, in the AFC, Bills versus Broncos, Steelers versus Ravens, Texans versus Chargers, and in the AFC, Eagles versus Commanders, Seahawks versus Packers, and Falcons versus Vikings. Woo! Wilkins, which of those 6 higher-seeded teams would be in most trouble in the wildcard round?
Looking at this bracket, it's pretty crazy to me that the winner of the NFC West is going to end up as the 3 seed in the conference. I mean, it just seems like no one really wants to run away with that division. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the reality is that the winner of that division, assuming they get the 3 seed, is going to end up playing a really good wildcard team from the NFC North, because they're going to send 2. And as things currently stand, they're playing the Packers, and I think they would get run over by them. I think Seattle's a tough place to play, and I like the Seahawks more than most. I love Geno Smith. I think that offense has a lot of potential, and the defense has been while inconsistent. We've started to see signs of the unit that Mike McDonald is hoping to build, but the Packers are just such a complete team. They can destroy you through the air on offense, same thing on the ground, and the defense has been really good since bringing in Jeff Hafley in the offseason. So I expect that the Packers would roll, and I see them as a legitimate Super Bowl contender. So that's not a matchup that the Seahawks should want in the first round, but I don't know how they're going to avoid something like that at this point.
Seattle's definitely one of those teams I think is getting better each and every week. So they got so much talent on defense. Mm-hmm. I really hope it continues to come together. But I mean, Green Bay is definitely coaching-wise.
Seems like Seattle's a year away from being what they want to be. Yeah.
T, who's your top-seeded team you think would be in the most trouble in the wildcard round?
Yeah, we haven't talked about Houston, I think, enough so far throughout the year and their struggles. The offensive line's been one of the worst in the league. They're bottom 10 in sack rate, bottom 5 in pressure rate allowed, 27th, I believe, in pass blocking efficiency. I really like this team. I feel like they're probably feeling very disappointed considering the investment they made, because it's come together on defense. They're a very good unit defensively, especially against the pass. But when you go up against this Chargers team and you see a pretty bad red zone defense against one of the best red zone defenses in the league, a team that could take advantage of that offensive line with Khalil Mack, Tuli Tuipulotu, Joey Bosa as he gets more healthy, that pass rush is going to cause a lot of problems with a really good defense. So I've been waiting for it to come together for this team, but I don't think it will at all this year. And I think whoever they play, whether it's the Chargers or potentially Baltimore, are going to give them a lot of trouble because they just haven't found it. And I don't blame C.J. Stroud for it. Yeah. I think it's the surrounding pieces. But, man, it sucks because his defense is really good too.
Did you throw in the whoever they play because you're a Chargers fan? You want to look too biased?
Yeah, I don't want to look too biased. Like I think Baltimore has probably a better chance of being the team they play, considering that this is the 4 seed against the 5 seed. But LA's in that spot right now. Even though we lost to Baltimore, they are in that spot.
They are indeed. Boone, who's your top-seeded team that you worry for in the wildcard round?
I will say, I mean, we talked about them already. I like the Steelers. I like the coaching staff, like I just said. But, man, I would be worried about playing the Ravens. And I know the Steelers just beat them a few weeks ago. It was a really close game. And I know we're going to see them again in a couple weeks here, so they'll have another matchup. And maybe this is going to flip, right? There's still a good chance that Baltimore could take back the division. But do you want to go against Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry in January in a cold weather game in Pittsburgh? I don't like it. And if you look at like the history of these teams, like since Lamar showed up, and I know you can't go back too far like historically with stuff, but the Ravens have had a lot more playoff success than the Steelers had in recent years. The Steelers have made the playoffs 3 times in the last 6 years, I believe, and they've lost in the wild card round every single time. The Ravens have made it 5 times, I think, during that stretch. They've made it to the division round 3 times. They made it to the conference championship 1 time. Like, they have had playoff success. I think even though Justin Tucker could miss kicks, even though Russell Wilson is playing really well, I would be very worried if I was Pittsburgh having to host Baltimore.
That was the difference for Pittsburgh.
I was going to say they lost by 2. They lost by 2 in a game where Justin Tucker missed multiple field goals.
I'm just writing that script over here, right? It's going to be Tucker beating the Steelers in the playoffs on a last-second field goal.
100%.
It's a good. I mean, Tomlin has like the slightest edge. I was thinking about picking this one too, and Tomlin's like 36-30 against Harbaugh, so slight edge. Being at home, I only say this because could you imagine the discourse if Lamar loses a first-round playoff game and doesn't, like with bringing in Derrick Henry, a lot of the help for the offense, but the defense is the thing that's kind of killing them, and obviously Tucker. If they lost this game, the discourse would be tough.
I would have said the Falcons probably
Of
here,
course.
but because we mentioned them in the last one, I didn't
Who knows
think
if
we
they're
need to
even
bring
making
it up
the playoffs.
again.
I think the Bucks are going to
That
win
is
the
also
NFC
true.
South.
Yeah.
Anyways, good stuff, gents, and thanks very much to Enterprise for sponsoring Heavy Lies the Crown. Gentlemen, before we go home, I want to do another quick exercise inspired by none other than Jameis Winston. He threw for 4 touchdowns, almost 500 yards, and fittingly, 3 interceptions in an incredibly captivating Monday Night Football loss to the Denver Broncos. Now, Jameis, since taking over for Deshaun Watson, in terms of his overall production on paper, it's been pretty Jameis-esque, but between his occasionally inspired play and his persona, of course, he's been pretty fun to watch over this last little while, which brings me to my question. Who is the other random guy, the non-star, the Jameis Winston, that you've most enjoyed watching this season? Wilkie, who you got?
Should I do it? I'm going to do it. It's Anthony Richardson.
Oh, my goodness.
Listen, I know that I'm going to have a hard time convincing people, including Tyler, that he's a good quarterback right now. And that's fine, because in many ways he's not. But what I've enjoyed is taking in the narratives about him so far this season and diving into the tape after every game and finding a lot of things that are honestly really promising. Of course, there are a lot of misses. There are some issues with timing. There are issues with decision making. There's no arguing that. He needs to clean those things up. But what I've found is there's also a lot of encouraging things for such a young quarterback. His ability to maneuver the pocket, his ability to avoid sacks, and a lot of really good throws on tape where you're coming away being like, can the receiver please make a play on the football here? I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'm certain that he ranks at the top of the league in EPA loss to drops. It's just been that bad from the Colts receivers. So, I mean, look, I was really high on him in the draft. I know it's been a rough start, but I still to this point have not seen anything that would make me come off of that stance. And, you know, not to make it a who would you rather game or anything, but long-term view, I would still take him over a lot of starters in the league right now. So, yeah, it's just been a really fun thing for me to see a lot of people focus on the completion percentage and decide what he is based on that, and then dive into the film and see a lot more encouraging things that remind me of why I liked him so much coming out of the draft.
I was looking around at the shelves here because I was trying to find like a book to read while you were talking about Anthony Richardson. Because even I'm sick about talking of him on the show, right? Like, and I like him a lot, but I think we're at the point where we need a little more data. We need to see him do this for a little longer into next season, and let's figure out what he can become and what he can develop into. But yeah, he's getting pretty close to Jets territory here. We're not going to bring him up on the show anymore. I think we're getting pretty close to that.
Just got to watch the games. You just got to watch the games, and you can see.
The Colts games?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yes, I can watch all the plays that no longer exist technically because they're taken back by penalty.
T, who's your Jameis Winston?
Yeah, I think Brian Thomas has gone really under the radar all year, mostly because the Jags have been the worst team in the NFL. But I wouldn't be in the spot where I'm going to say in this class that, he's like the best receiver. Like we're talking about Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr., but I think he's the clear number 3, even though Ladd McConkey's been the best rookie. Thomas is just consistent separator, especially downfield. You want to talk about a player that's lost a lot of big plays because of, lack of play from his teammate, his quarterbacks in Trevor Lawrence and Mac Jones. Early in the season, there were a lot of missed plays to Brian Thomas where he's available. There's a stat that's calculated for Player Profiler. He has a 1.98 yards of target separation, which is top 15 at the position. A lot of the advanced numbers really like this guy in terms of being able to get open. And he's put up a pretty productive season, over 700 yards receiving on the year. He's been very good, 6 touchdowns as well. If this is like the building block for this team, I think, is Brian Thomas, because I think he's bound to be a superstar once this Jags team gets it together, and the numbers indicate that. Like if he has Trevor Lawrence for a healthy season, we're talking 1,200, 1,300 yards, nearing 10 touchdowns. I was questioning the investment when they drafted him and then also added Gabriel Davis, but it seems like the right move because I think Brian Thomas is a star in the making.
I'm so mad at myself because the first time when I went through, I don't start my rookie prospect profiles until January because I just don't have time during the NFL season. So in January when the fantasy season dies down, I get into it, and my first run through it, I had Brian Thomas Jr. as the 3rd best receiver in the class behind the 2 obvious ones, right? Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors, and people gave me a ton of flack for it, and I actually let them win. And everyone else, Roma Dunze's right there with the other top 2 guys. And listen, maybe Dunze will end up having a great career, but yeah, I'm so mad that I didn't stick to my guns on that one because he looked like a great player in college and since getting to the pros, he's showing us that he is that kind of player.
Boone, who's your guy?
Now, I had two for this one. I wanted to say George Pickens because George Pickens is like, he's a good player. He's fun to watch. He's also like kind of weird like Jameis Winston off the field, right? In his interviews and stuff. And I love that about him. But I've brought up George Pickens on the show before. I've talked about him a bunch. So instead, I'm going to go with Jackson Smith and Jigma. And I mean, you look at what happened to him last year, and there was like the injury, like hurt his wrist early in the season there, and he just really didn't get off to a good start. But I think the rookie struggles for him, we can tie it all to Shane Waldron at this point, right? That was his offensive coordinator in Seattle last year. And the way that they were using him, his ADOT was around 6 yards. I think it was 6.4 yards. It was terrible. It was all these short throws. This season, they're using him more downfield. They're using him like, potentially like a future number one receiver in that offense. I know they have DK Metcalf right now, but it's been great to see his stats on a per game basis have almost doubled in pretty much every category. And that average depth of target went from 6 to 9 point something at this point. So, it's really great to see him having a good season. And I think he's going to go on to have a great career. And if anybody bought low on him in fantasy after what happened last year, they made a very smart move.
I love JSN. I think he's going to be like Brian Thomas, a star, and he's just been sitting behind Tyler Lockett and then kind of surpassed him this year. And I remember looking at it early in his rookie season, and his ADOT was like half of that. It was like 3 yards. It wasn't making any sense. This guy's an explosive player, a fantastic player. I got to see him live in the Rose Bowl against Utah 3 years ago, and he had like 250 receiving yards and has become one of my favorite players in the league. So I'm so happy to see that he's finally getting the right opportunities.
I'm a little surprised there wasn't a little love for the other hyphenated wide receiver in Nick Westbrook-Akine. Look, he's not the kind of talent that Brian Thomas is or that JSN is, but 8 touchdowns on 20 receptions? Yeah. That's unheard of. He's like an undrafted fifth-year player who has more receiving touchdowns than Amon-Ra St. Brown, or than everyone except Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamar Chase, George Kittle. Like, where's the love?
I thought that was going to be trivia.
Since their bye week, he's a low-end wide receiver too. He's a top 24 fantasy receiver on a per-game basis. Now, it's so inflated by the touchdowns.
Picking him up,
And in deep dynasty leagues, I'm starting him in a couple spots where you have like multiple flex positions and stuff. True. But yeah, it's a scary one. But here's the thing: their schedule the rest of the way, it's incredibly easy. Like, he could keep this up potentially. Like, they get the Jags twice over the next 4 weeks, which is a great matchup. Like, he could potentially continue to put up good stats. And that's the funny thing about fantasy. And this time of year, we all joke that, like, why do we even play fantasy? Because you look at this season and, they sign Calvin Ridley in the offseason, the Titans do. Then they trade away DeAndre Hopkins. Then, Treylon Burks gets hurt and ends up on IR. And all of a sudden, Nick Westbrook-Akine ends up being the guy that, you should have picked up and had on your team the whole time. Just insane.
And he has the longest touchdown in the league this season, 98 yards.
Can you imagine that as like 10 years from now, you're sitting around the campfire with your buddies and you just remind them like Nick Westbrook-Akine led the if he led the league.
Going to be asking us
touchdowns. I was just going to say that was definitely a segue to the trivia.
But yeah, he's like a Hall of Famer when it's going to come to like guy remembering. It's like, remember Nick Westbrook? He's like him and Lendale White, Anyways, you guys, you know where I'm going with this. It's that time. It's trivia time. Before we go home, a little game for you. Okay, we're going back to our usual format, following our little anomaly on Thanksgiving. Here we go. Jameis Winston recently asked the Lord to deliver him from pick sixes. He's thrown 14 of them in his NFL career. Can you name the 6 other active quarterbacks with 10 or more career pick sixes? I'll give it to you one more time. Jameis Winston recently asked the Lord to deliver him from pick sixes. He's thrown 14 of them in his NFL career. Can you name the 6 other active QBs with 10 or more career pick sixes? Boone, you're up first.
I am going to say Kirk Cousins. It's the theme of the show.
Correct. Wow, Captain Kirk has thrown 15 of them in his NFL career. Wilkie.
Joe Flacco.
Correct. He's tied with Jameis Winston. He's thrown 14 of them in his NFL career.
That's a good pull. Brett Favre.
No, active.
Active. See, I was literally just thinking about Favre while you were like.
I do think he has the all-time record for pick sixes, but respect the game.
Derek Carr.
Correct. He's got 17 of them for his NFL career. That's third among active quarterbacks.
Now, do you go just longevity here? Russell Wilson.
Good guess. But I feel like Russ has been pretty good in terms of avoiding pick sixes. I mean, and interceptions generally, but that's a good guess.
Was just going for someone that's been in the league,
for
a
time.
while, yeah.
Yeah, good to go. Good to guess the veterans. Boone's out. Wilkie?
I have one loaded that I know is right.
Dak Prescott?
Andy Dalton.
Correct.
Well done.
Tyler is the champion. A long-awaited championship for T. Andy Dalton has 19 of them, so he's second among active quarterbacks in pick sixes. I'll throw it to the group. Whoever responds first gets an honorable mention. One more guess for who leads all active quarterbacks in pick sixes.
I'm trying to think of another old. Case Keenum's still active. I doubt he's played enough to get 10. Is Rodgers on there?
He's not.
Okay. I just throw that.
Yeah,
out
he
there
was
just
the
'cause
other
he's
one that I
active.
was thinking about. But yeah, a guy who doesn't throw a ton of interceptions normally.
I'm trying to think of other like older. There's no other real old backups that have played a while, right?
What about old starters?
Old starters. You think
Baker
of
Mayfield?
No.
Russ. Who else has been moving around a bit?
10.
Matt
9.
Stafford.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Active leader among, pardon me, the active leader in pick sixes is indeed Matt Stafford. He's thrown 30 of them. 30 of them, which is 11 more than Andy Dalton, who's in second place.
Detroit Lions days.
So the two guys that you missed, Matt Stafford, the active leader, and Geno Smith with 10.
I was between Geno
another guy.
and Dak. I was just going for the longevity. I
Dak,
did
to
not
your
think of
credit, has
Stafford.
9, I believe, for his career. So he just missed the cutoff. I think Dak and Kyler Murray might even be tied with 9.
Yeah.
Anyways, good stuff, fellas. Well done. T, congratulations. You've been waiting for that one for a while. You finally got it. You love to see it.
Let the record show he said Brett Favre first.
He did say Brett Favre first.
Yes. Asterisk next to that one.
Yeah. Hey,
Out after first round.
he's so desperate we can't take this one away
It's true.
from him.
He gets the dub.
Exactly. And that'll do it for today's episode of No Timeouts. Once again, big shout out to our friends over at Enterprise for sponsoring today's episode. That is Justin Boone. That's Tyler MacKillop. That's Dan Wilkins. And my name is Jonah Birnbaum. We'll see you next time.